Good afternoon. I'm Delegate Maggie McIntosh, Chair of the Appropriations Committee, and I'm happy to welcome you today to our Appropriations Committee hearing on February 25th, 2021. We'll be hearing a number of bills today, beginning with, and I will read the list in the succession of the bills, House Bill 1124, then House Bill 1131, then House Bill 1173, House Bill 878, House Bill 1123, House Bill 1054, House Bill 904, House Bill 803, House Bill 913. And just as a reminder to everyone that sponsors have ample time to introduce their bill, and witnesses that are here to testify either for or against a bill have 2-minute time limit. So with that, I'm going to begin the day again with House Bill 1124, Delegate Harrison. Welcome.
Well, good afternoon, Madam Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, and members of the Appropriations Committee. For the record, I'm Delegate Andrea Harrison, here to present House Bill 1124, which actually is a very easy, simple bill. In 2018, there was a bill introduced, House Bill 1786, which established the Richard Collins III Leadership with Honor Scholarship. And for the record, those who may or may not remember, Lieutenant Collins was unfortunately killed. He's a ROTC student at Bowie State University, unfortunately killed on the campus of the University of Maryland College Park during a hate crime incident. This bill was originally introduced by Senator Peters, the late Senator Mike Miller, along with now Senator Michael Jackson. This bill is simply to make one small correction. The bill has money set aside for scholarships for individuals of HBCU. The original bill indicated that it would be 25% to Bowie State University student, 75% going to other HBCUs in the state. That should have said at least 25% and not a definitive 25%. So HB 1124 basically says that at least 25% would go to a Bowie State University ROTC student, with the remainder up to 75% to other students, other HBCU students. And that is the gist of this bill. And I would request respectfully a favorable report. Thank you.
Okay, very good. We have any questions of the sponsor? So raise your blue or yellow hand. I see none. Very good. Thank you very much for being with us today in Appropriations Committee.
Thank you so much. Have a good day.
You're welcome. Yeah, you too. And we're now going to move to I believe it's two bills. No, just one bill. Carroll County delegation bill that will be, I think they hired kind of a nice little old country lawyer to represent in the committee. So Delegate Shoemaker, come on up and present your bill. This is 1131.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is Carroll County's annual public facilities bond bill. Carroll County is one of like 6 counties left in the state. That is a board of commissioner form of government. So in order to float public debt, they have to do so under the auspices of the Maryland General Assembly, and hence this bill. This is for $48.45 million for essentially renovations to schools, ag land preservation programs, stormwater facility renovations, and a host of other things. I don't know if Mike Fowler is online with us or not. He's the government liaison for Carroll County government, but he's here to answer any technical questions, and respectfully, Madam Chair, we would request a favorable report.
Okay, any questions of the sponsor? Any questions at all? Is Michael Fowler here to answer questions that the country lawyer can't answer? I can't imagine that would happen.
Thank you.
I see no questions, so we're gonna call it good for the day. How's that?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate it.
You're very welcome.
Good to see you.
Good to see you. House Bill 1173, Calvert County delegation. Who we got here?
Good afternoon, Chair McIntosh and members of the Appropriations Committee. My name is Chris Hopkins. I'm here on behalf of Delegate Mark Fisher, who is currently in another bill hearing. This bill authorizes the Calvert County Commissioners to issue up to the amended $20 million in general obligation bonds for the acquisition, construction, improvement, or renovation of public buildings, facilities, and public works projects. The date of maturity of the bonds cannot exceed 30 years. The bill takes effect June 1st, 2021. We have sent over the delegation letter of support for to this bill, which reduces the amount from $26.5 million to $20 million. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions? And I see John Norris may be here. Is he just to answer questions?
Yes.
Okay. All right. I see no questions though. You did a great job, Chris.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Have a great day.
You too.
Now we're going to move to House Bill 878, our own Delegate Chang, Vice Chair of the committee.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and good afternoon to members of the Appropriations Committee. It's a great day to introduce today House Bill 878. I want to thank the committee for this opportunity to introduce it. For the record, I'm Mark Chang, member of the Maryland House of Delegates, District 32. There's over 500,000 septic tanks all across the state, and of the 500,000, there's about 10% that are in failing or poor condition. What House Bill 878 would do would enable the counties to issue notes in anticipation of the receipts that they would receive to the Bay Restoration Fund. What would happen is that the funds would be able to, the net proceeds of the sales back to the counties will be able to cover the cost for the loans and grants that would be administered to different residential properties that have these different septic tank issues. Also, that the refunds of more than one issues of the notes would be able to come from these funds. Right now, there's $115 million in the Bay Restoration Fund, and of that $115 million is $15 million that's dedicated to the septic tank funding portion of the Bay Restoration Fund. And all the counties all across the state receive funding through this funding that's available to the Bay Restoration Fund. There are amendments to the bill, and I do want to thank the Maryland Department of Environment for working with us on this. And the amendments would be that in addition to the septic tanks, specifically the BAT, the best available technology, which is the current generation, next generation technology for septic tanks, it would also include any additional on-site components and drain fields and engineering. And then also with, as far as with the rebates or the issuance of the notes, that it would specifically go to the notes that were issued for the Bay Restoration Fund. An aside piece of information that I think the committee should be aware of is that the Department of Legislative Services and the Maryland Department of Environment have been collaborating as far as what is in the fund balance of the Bay Restoration Fund. And they're projecting in 2026 that there'll probably be an estimated $58 million in that fund. And it's important for us as a committee to look at that, and if there are any projects in critical areas that we could use to capitalize on that, this may be an opportunity. Thank you so much for the opportunity to present House Bill 878. There are several testimonies that will be following myself, and I urge the committee for a favorable report. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And before we ask if there are any questions of the vice chair, I might mention that this program was created while I was chair of environment. And so I'm very familiar with this program and really familiar with all the good it's done.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Madam Chair, for your leadership.
Yeah, it's been the major reason that we have been able to meet the federal goals on reducing nitrogen in the state of Maryland. So this is just really giving, and my question to you is, this is just really giving the counties another tool in their toolbox to be able to capitalize this money and get more projects done in a more timely fashion. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am, Madam Chair, it is. And thank you for your leadership in 2004 with the implementation of the Bay Restoration Fund in 2012 with the project's money being dedicated towards septic tanks. And what it does help mitigate the phosphorus and nitrogen pollutants.
Right, that's correct.
Thank you.
Good. Any other questions of the Vice Chair? Sponsor of the bill. I see none. So we're going to move now to those who've come to sign up in favor of the bill. And we have Matthew Geckel, Back River Precast.
Thank you, Madam Chair and committee members. I am Matt Geckel with Back River Precast, a precast concrete manufacturer located in the state of Maryland. I'm here to testify in favor of HB 878. This bill will enable the counties to purchase bonds, fund the repairs of septic systems that use BATs by offering homeowners low-interest loans to pay for the dispersal part of the system. The dispersal part of the system currently does not get any help from the state unless you are very low income, and then very few of those funded by the state. And this is not a grant, this is just a low-interest loan. And the reason homeowners need low-interest loans and access to funds, septic repairs come all of a sudden and can be very expensive. They can cost as much as $75,000 to pay for everything needed to get the repair done. And this loan would enable them to pay for everything from engineering to materials and installation. Thank you very much, and I hope you vote in favor of this.
Thank you. We're going to move on to Edward Harrison.
Yes, ma'am. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and committee members. My name is Eddie Harrison and testifying in support of HB 878. I'm an unpaid legislative liaison for the Maryland On-Site Wastewater Professional Association, or MAPA. I'm also a small business owner of BAT On-Site LLC, an automated on-site wastewater operation and maintenance provider. I've been involved in the on-site wastewater industry since 1984. The on-site wastewater system is the most expensive appliance in the home. All on-site wastewater systems eventually fail. The typical life expectancy is 20 to 30 years. This is why today's approved lots require the planner to provide room for 2 repairs on any new lot. After the system has served its useful life, the dispersal part of the system gets replaced for a reasonable price of $4,000 to $9,000. A significant number of homes built prior to 1960 would not be allowed to be built today due to the ground not meeting current perk testing practices. And some homes since that time would not be built either. When the systems fail on these lots, the repair can become much more challenging. MDE can get involved and the system can fall under what is called innovative or alternative, INA. These systems require engineering pretreatment, including BAT and automated dispersal systems, and can cost the property owner anywhere from $30,000 to $50,000 or more. There's not always equity in the home to cover the expense of repair. And if the repair is not done, the property can't be sold, thus adding insult to injury. Some cases, the property ends up in foreclosure, abandoned, a blight in the community, and lowering property values. In many cases, the system just continues to fail and cause a safety hazard to public health and the environment. In many cases, the system just continues to AMALPA supports any additional sources of revenue to allow property owners to repair the on-site system on these difficult lights on the site.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your time, and please support HB 878.
Thank you very much. We have now Michael Sanderson.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and thanks to the sponsor for the bill. I'm Michael Sanderson with the Maryland Association of Counties, also in support of the bill. And it sounds to me that the department's technical amendments will do nothing but further the idea here. Madam Chair, you took the words out of my mouth. This is a tool in the toolbox for the counties who are actually the implementers on the ground of these projects. This bill doesn't create new uses. It doesn't create new funding source, but it's really just a flexible mechanism. For the most part, a lot of these projects we've been able to do on a cash basis. Money comes in for the year, you can plan projects within the year. To the extent that you want to accelerate or you want to do larger scale projects, the flexibility in this bill is the perfect tool to let us take a 5-year look or a 15-year look and accelerate the cleanup now, pay for it over time. Great idea, good bill, we support.
Thank you. Emily Ransom.
Hi, good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee. I'm Emily Ranson with Clean Water Action here in support of House Bill 878. As said, failing septic systems are an ongoing problem for Maryland's homeowners. I also like to bring it back to water quality. It's also a problem for Maryland's waterways. When a septic system isn't working, it's basically not treating human waste, which is a problem. The septic system is more than just that box. And so when the BRF right now really focuses on the nitrogen reducing BAT technology, we also want to make sure that those dispersal systems are also getting covered, especially since with the increased rain events that we've been seeing, with the marginal lots, our aging housing stock, it's important that we make sure that a person's entire wastewater disposal unit is functioning for public health, for our waterways, for all of that. So Maryland, we don't currently have enough funding to really tackle the scope of this problem. And one of the things with septic systems is we oftentimes find the problem at property sale, which is a super risky time for homeowners, for people trying to purchase the home. And so we're enthusiastic about having this tool in the toolbox to have that, consistent fund available for fixing problems as they emerge. So we urge a favorable report. Thanks.
Thank you. Jean von Guten.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I'm retired from 38 years working with the Frederick County and Montgomery County well and septic sections. And I just want to give the committee the perspective of local health. Many homeowners are simply unable to afford these expensive upgrades, and the BRF program has certainly helped them to shoulder these costs. But many counties run out of the funds before the calendar year ends. House Bill 878 creates a mechanism whereby counties can leverage their funds and borrow additional money to help many more homeowners. I can tell you the costs associated with enforcement are far greater than the cost to administer these programs, and the benefits to the homeowners are substantial. Let's help expand the BRF for many more Maryland homeowners. Thank you.
Okay. That concludes all of the people signed up. Are there any questions of any of the folks who have testified on behalf of the bill? Okay, very good. That concludes the bill hearing. We're now going to move to House Bill 1123, and we have a special guest here today who is standing in for Delegate Resnick. We have Ms. Holt, who is here to present the bill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Sarah Holt. I'm presenting on behalf of Delegate Resnick, who can't be here today. So HB 1123 is a bill about our local health departments who, as we all know, are on the front lines in Maryland protecting our public health. During the current pandemic, we should all be grateful for our health officers and their staff who who have stepped up to what could be considered the greatest public health challenge of our lifetime and have worked tirelessly to protect our communities. HB 1123 is designed to help make sure that we are doing right for our front lines of public health. I have some witnesses who will talk to you about the work that is done in our local health departments, both in times of crisis like now and during so-called ordinary times. We have asked more and more of them over time. They're tracking more diseases and trends than they were a decade ago. Their plates are full, but we have not kept up in supporting them. The core funding that the state sends to our local health departments was cut back during the Great Recession and was never fully restored. It's not that anybody ever truly decided that public health wasn't a priority. We just have had other things that have come up and it hasn't made it to the top of the list. So HB 1123 is taking some steps in the right direction. It is a bump in their core funding for 2 years, so it has no effect on this year's budget. And there is some language to make sure that they have flexibility in using those funds for prevention and data exchange functions that are connected to their mission. And we want the health departments to look at the information systems that they all rely on with an eye towards bringing them fully into the 21st century. But that portion of the bill is just a study. If there's funding involved, they would have to come back to the committee for that. And I believe we have 3 of our county health officers with us. We have Dr. Nilesh Kalyanaraman from Arundel, Natasha Mayhew from Baltimore City, and Leslie Fry from Montgomery County. And Michael Sanderson is here from Mako, and he can answer any bills or any questions on the bill. Thank you.
Okay. Any questions of the sponsor? Okay, seeing none, we're going to move to the folks that are here. We'll start with Leslie Fry, Montgomery County.
Madam Chairman, I did have my little yellow.
Oh, I'm very sorry. I'm very sorry.
That's all right.
You have a question?
Yeah, I do, but it might need to wait for the experts, but
Okay.
Would you rather we do that?
Yeah, we'll wait till the end. Okay.
That's
All
fine.
right. Delegate Fry, pardon me, Leslie Fry.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. For the record, my name is Leslie Fry, and I'm here on behalf of Montgomery County. Montgomery County supports House Bill 1123 because of the much needed resources it would bring to the Department of Health and Human Services. You all have become quite familiar with the work of public health departments to respond to a pandemic in the past year. So I'd like to draw your attention to the routine public health functions that our department do year in, year out that are funded by public health core funding. Core funding is used by Montgomery County Department of Health and Human Services to conduct routine communicable disease control and for our sexually transmitted infection and tuberculosis clinics, among many other programs. Taking communicable disease control as an example, core funding is used to employ 4 nurses who are tasked with investigation, casework, contact tracing, and control management. Last year alone, this program handled more than 2,100 cases of communicable diseases as serious as meningitis, hepatitis, and Zika virus, as well as the very common Lyme disease and around 700 cases of rabies. Along with other staff, these nurses track, investigate, conduct follow-up, and on occasion provide treatment to county residents diagnosed with these diseases. With limited funding, at times the response to cases has to be triaged to give priority to the most serious diseases, leaving some, such as Lyme disease, which is serious and life-altering to someone who contracts it, to be investigated after contagious disease cases are handled first. With an increase in core funding, all cases of communicable disease can be given the same priority handling. The workload of handling of almost 3,000 communicable disease cases is more than enough to keep these nurses busy, but then add pandemic response to their list of responsibilities. I'm sure you all know that local health departments have been in an all hands on deck mode for the past year. And this has required the reassigning of dozens of staff to handle contact tracing, case management, and now vaccine administration that originates in our disease control units. While House Bill 1123 won't enable us to maintain our pandemic level of staffing for years to come, it will show our public health workers that the state recognizes and values the fact that many of them have been working every day for a year now, meeting the needs of our residents and working hard to minimize human suffering. We ask that you vote favorably on this core funding increase because it's the right thing to do for our staff, our departments, and our communities. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you very much for being here. We're now going to move to the Anne Arundel County Department of Health. Nalish, are you here?
I am.
This is, can I brag on you a little bit?
Let's do it.
This is a resident of the 43rd District, a good neighbor, and a great young man who's taken on a huge responsibility in Anne Arundel County, doing a great job. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, it is good to see you. It's been a little while, Chairwoman.
Yes.
And I want to thank Vice Chair Delegate Mark Chang and members of the Appropriations Committee as well for allowing me to be here today. I'm Dr. Nilesh Kalyanaraman, the Health Officer for Anne Arundel County, and I'm here to testify in strong support of this bill. I'm representing both the Anne Arundel County Department of Health and MACHO, the Maryland Association of County Health Officials. I'm testifying to ensure that local health departments have adequate core funding to maintain our critical everyday programs and deal with catastrophic ongoing public health emergencies like COVID-19. This core funding is vital for maintaining the structure of the health department, but it's also needed so that we are ready to respond to a public health emergency when it happens. Our local health departments, they're the first line of defense, combating everyday health issues like communicable diseases, environmental hazards, and behavioral health issues. But we're also looking to what's coming ahead so that we are able to address issues that are emerging. In 2020, the Anne Arundel County Department of Health launched an Office of Health Equity and Racial Justice to advance this essential work of addressing health disparities and systemic racism. Why is that important? Well, in 2020, we also had our COVID-19 pandemic. And we saw those disparities in the pandemic appear within weeks of the virus first arriving in this county. While we have protocols in place to address public health emergencies, COVID-19 has stretched our staff and resources. We set up a comprehensive contact tracing department from day one, testing in multiple locations. We're rolling out vaccinations with a focus on equity as well as speed. And up till now, health departments really haven't gotten a single dollar of money to get vaccines rolling, and yet we've done that. Critically, core local health department funding was cut in FY9 by almost $12 million, and in FY10, we faced further cuts. Although there have been some slight additions, we've never actually gotten back to those levels. For our county health department in FY10, we got $4,454,000. 11 years later, we received $4,448,000. That's a $6,000 decrease over 11 years, despite our population growing by 40,000 people, having additional responsibilities, and not keeping up with inflation. What's really important about this bill is that it also addresses the technology improvements that are critical. We all know data is important. So updating hardware, software, hiring IT, epidemiology personnel, that's what we need to get data to manage the needs and complexity. And we see that during COVID-19. We need to have that data ready at a moment's notice. So I hope this year has reminded everyone of the value of public health. I think the sponsor spoke well and said that it's not that we were not valued, we just didn't pay enough attention to it. And so I ask that you recognize and prioritize the hard work of public health, local health departments are doing, and support this bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Good to have you again. And now we're going to turn to Natasha. Is Natasha here?
Yes, good afternoon, Chair, members of the committee. Natasha May here on behalf of the Mayor of Baltimore City in support of House Bill 1123. I'm proud to be here on the panel with fellow local government health partners, and it's been an issue I've worked closely on for a number of years. As been mentioned, core funding supports essential public health services and public health infrastructure, including the communicable diseases, environmental health, family planning, maternal and child health, wellness promotion, adult and geriatric health, and administration and communications of services. Additional core funding would allow us to reinvest, would allow the health department to reinvest in additional enforcement of laws and regulations, linkages of residents to needed health services, and investigation of health problems. I'd like to know that Baltimore City suffers from a long history of inequality and systematic racism, which has led to health disparities and unequal access to health resources and opportunities. As the previous panelists had mentioned, the COVID-19 pandemic has further exposed the influence of social, economic, environmental conditions that have created disparities in the health outcomes for our city's population. The pandemic has shown higher positivity rates for our Black and Latinx residents, disparities in those who are able to get shots, and the majority of cases have been in zip codes with the highest concentration of poverty. In light of these disparities, our health department has worked tirelessly to ensure there's equitable allocation and administration of vaccines, and has developed a multi-strategy approach for allocating and administering them to our most vulnerable populations. So the health department is doing a lot with what little resources they have for the pandemic, but more broadly. So I want to stress the mayor, in partnership with the health department, is committed to ensuring with additional core funding that we could have equitable access to healthcare, achieve parity across our diverse population. The additional core funding will go a long way to improving our public health services, our public health infrastructure, and targeting and preventing treatment for those across our community. And with that, I urge a favorable report.
Thank you very much. Delegate Grice, is it okay if I hold questions till the end? Okay, thank you. We have Michael Sanderson next.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Michael Sanderson with the Maryland Association of Counties. Are grateful for Delegate Resnick's introducing the bill, and Sarian has been a joy to work with on this. You've heard from other panelists about the nuts and bolts of the bill. I'll just say, to be candid, our local health departments were saved from drowning this year because of the quick action of our Congress. Let that sink in. Like, if it weren't for the quick movement of the US Congress to do a CARES bill that sent a bunch of money to the state and a bunch of it went right to local governments, they would not have had the resources to do their jobs. Unbelievable that we could have been left in that spot. And to leave this to the future quick actions of the United States Congress is doing a disservice to Maryland residents. The nuts and bolts of this bill, you've already heard about. No funding effect on the budget you're putting together now, but in the future, make some small steps back in the right direction toward where we would have been at a level of commitment we all agreed made sense before the Great Recession. The funding flexibility, I actually personally had a hand in helping to write the bill that said what core funding goes for back 25 or so years ago. We didn't envision then all the things that they're doing now. It's not really expanding uses. It's just clarifying that going out and doing things like looking at wastewater systems to determine if there's community spread of COVID, something we didn't think about 25 years ago, but IT systems and that sort of stuff, it's the unsexy parts of public health that need your help. Grant funding goes for the high profile stuff. This is the money to keep the lights on. And looking forward, IT systems and databases and so forth, public health is increasingly information-based as well as hands-on practitioner-based. And having those systems, we heard testimony at the Senate hearing about health offices that are faxing paperwork to one another so they can be printed out and put into health files. But you can't access and sort data like that. It's not the proper way to maintain information about public health issues. Strongly support this bill. This is one of MACO's top initiatives for this legislative session. We'd encourage your help.
Thank you. And I just want to interject here and say that frequently I refer to a DLS study that came out about 3 years ago that talked about some of the agencies in our state where there were so many vacancies, so many unfilled positions, stagnant funding, so on and so forth, that they questioned whether or not some of these agencies were even capable of fulfilling their mission. And this, by the way, department is one of them. And, even though I think there's differing opinions on how well the health department has done. I do know that, these local health departments have been the front line, period, end of quotation, at what we're facing and what we faced in the last year and will continue to be for a long time to come. So DLS questioned some 3 years ago the number of vacancies, the inadequate funding they believe that that was happening with this agency. With that, I'll keep my mouth shut and I'll let other delegates ask their questions. I'm going to start with Delegate Kittleman, okay? Who's been very patient.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I had some of my questions answered but this bill strikes me as unusual, and I realize what it is. It's like it's kind of like a budget. We would go to the budget and say, no, we need more money in these categories, but instead we're actually putting it in a bill. And I wondered why. And I also, did we talk to the administration? Did we talk to the Department of Health and see what their thoughts were on this?
Yes, we have a letter of support from some of the counties, and then we also have a letter of information from MDH. So that ought to be in your floor system.
I saw that. All right, thank you.
Delegate Grice.
There we go. Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, it's been a while since I was a county commissioner years ago, but I do remember advocating for more money because I remember how grossly underfunded our health departments were then. And I'm sure that hasn't changed a whole lot since. But I do have a question, though, and there's a lot of money coming down the pipe over the next year or two that will go to the health departments. I'm just going to read down the list now. And I just want to, my question is for the health departments that have testified already, have you guys factored the additional money that's coming very soon to you guys into this? Because I just want to make sure, I mean, obviously nobody's ever going to turn away money, but at the same time, I mean, every single dollar that we appropriate in the budget, it means something to somebody, you know, and I just want to be very careful that we don't overfund certain areas either. So the budget is introduced, the next fiscal year has a 7.2% increase over last year. And the governor just announced an additional $123 million that'll go to the health departments, another $9 million in the supplemental budget that'll go to the health departments, $5.4 million of COVID-19 crisis cooperative agreement. And then, and this is all in the letter of information from DBM, I believe. And then with the new federal stimulus package, $1.9 billion will go to local governments. So there's a lot of money that's coming down the pipe. And have you all at least calculated to a certain, as best you possibly can, I know it's very difficult to do, how that will impact your operation, in addition to, if this bill is passed?
Who wants to take that?
I'll give it a shot.
Sure. Thank you.
So a lot of the money, a lot of the money that's being discussed is one-time dollars. I think we have a couple of different issues that we're dealing with. One is that we've had long-time underinvestment in the services that are being required, and these one-time dollars will help, but it's largely going to defray costs that we've already incurred for COVID response. I think the second thing is that we're in public health, we're going to be facing some pretty significant challenges once we come out of COVID in terms of loss of staffing. We already know that's going to happen, requirements to upgrade our infrastructure. And so the dollars in this bill would really help us to solidify some of those staffing changes that we need to make to modernize and keep up with population growth and also increase demands. I think the hard part of your question is that because there are a lot of different funding sources, I can't give you a specific answer of how to map, right?
Yeah, you don't know how they're going to be disseminated either.
But I mentioned that our vaccine response was based on no additional dollars to date, right? It's starting to come in now, but that means we've had to put other concerns to the side and minimize those services. And I think that's the challenge we're facing is we're going to have to make up for those lost services because we're going to see their effects, and we're already seeing their effects.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for the question. We do have somebody signed up unfavorable. Vince McAvoy?
Madam Chair, we have not seen him enter the waiting room.
All right. That concludes the bill hearing on House Bill.
Madam Chair.
Yes. Oh, I'm very sorry. Whoa. I got two people that want to ask a question. I'm very sorry.
That's all right. No problem at all.
Yeah, Delegate Beitzel, go ahead, and then I'll take Delegate Krim. I'm sorry. Go ahead. Delegate Beitzel.
I have a question from Michael Sanderson. Is Michael still there?
Michael?
I'm here.
He's still
Okay. I think I heard you correct in saying that this is one of your top priorities, and so the local governments are all for this. You're aware, I guess, that there is, starting in fiscal 2023, there's a mandate that you come up with extra money locally to match the money the state puts in. And it does indicate that you're already providing funding that may almost meet what those requirements are. So I just want to make sure that I'm reading you right, is that this local governments are for this bill, even though there may be a mandate here.
Absolutely, Delegate. This is one of those programs where there's a state funding component and the counties are required to match that dollar amount.
Right.
But to be honest, over time, the counties have done so much more than the state that is an irrelevant mandate. We are so far exceeding that mandate that the little ramp up in this bill will not affect any of the requirements on the counties. We're already doing way more than we have to. We fill in the gap. We're good.
I appreciate that, because as you know, I was with local government, used to be on MACO board of directors.
Sure.
We're always hearing no mandates, no mandates. I just want to clarify that. So thank you.
Thank you.
Delegate Krim.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I'd like to ask the health officers there, what I'm hearing from my health officer in Frederick County is that her staff has worked, almost around the clock. And we know that's the case around the state. But she's unable to, of course, pay them overtime because they're just, they get comp time. And she said there's no way they will ever be able to use the comp time that they've earned. So how are we going to compensate these people who have worked around the clock but cannot benefit from their work time?
Anyone want to take that one?
I could offer that with an increase in core funding, we could hire additional staff. So a lot of times current employees can't use their comp time because it would leave them short-staffed and create more work for them down the road. So if there's more staff as a baseline, then perhaps those people could use their comp time in the future just because of overall increased staffing.
Okay. Thank you. All right, very good. Now that concludes the bill hearing. And we'll move.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
House, you're very welcome. You did a great job. We'll move to House Bill 1054. Delegate Barnes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The members of this committee will be familiar with the issues and the funding shortfalls that have been faced by the Maryland School for the Blind over the last few years. We have dealt with that in subcommittee and full committee, most recently last year by making sure that they were included in some funding formulas in Kerwin. We have also hoped to have addressed some of the shortfalls in that Kerwin just passed with some federal funding backfills. This hopes to be the third prong of that by requiring the Secretary of Budget and Management to develop a single uniform pay plan for the teachers and professional personnel at the School for the Blind. This will really just put them in line with School for the Deaf. This is the same system that they operate under. And I think will satisfy sort of those shortfalls with those three prongs. We hope into perpetuity, allow them to flourish and provide the great services to the students of our state that they do. So I know that the School for the Blind is here to testify, so I will defer to them for any technical questions and how this is operating and how we ended up with the shortfalls to begin with. And with that is my testimony, Madam Chair.
Any questions for the sponsor? Seeing none, we're going to now move to Marion Molinar, Maryland School for the Blind, and also Robert Hare. So let's start with Marion.
I know Marion is in the meeting.
How about Robert Hare?
I'm
Good. Oh, here's Marion.
Yes, I'm sorry, I was on mute.
That's okay.
I'll let Rob start if that's okay.
That's fine. Any
Sure.
order you want.
Thank you, Delegate McIntosh, Chair, and Delegate Barnes. Thank you so much for sponsoring this bill, this Maryland School for the Blind Pay Plan. So, just to give you all, the members of the committee, the backdrop, the Maryland School for the Blind has been here for 167 years, providing vital educational services for Maryland's blind students since 1853, and we serve over 1,000 students across the state through programs that are out in the community, teachers that are in your local jurisdictions providing Braille and white cane instruction to students right there in your local schools, as well as the on-campus, the traditional brick and mortar school here at the School for the Blind, which is located in Parkville, but serves 220 students from across the state on this beautiful campus that we are so thankful to have. In a prior study in 2019, we discovered that the reason that we were facing some of our financial problems, one of the primary drivers, is that since the 70s, since kids were mainstreamed, and rightfully so, what has taken the place of those students are much more complicated students. So we serve not just walking, talking, Braille reading and writing students, we serve students with very complicated profiles, which went from 30% 40 years ago to 96% today. So those include students with significant behavioral issues, who bite, who scratch, based on their disability, but also students who need total adult support for things like dressing and bathing and hand-over-hand toothbrushing and just very intimate, specialized needs that our students have. The funding formula never caught up with, obviously, the increased staffing resources that are required to serve those students over many, many years. So as we looked at this most recent study, we discovered that comparing ourselves to the School for the Deaf, we are funded, the primary basis of the funding is through the funding formula, which is exactly identical to the School for the Deaf. It is no different in any way. It is based on the enrollment. It is based on the per pupil foundation amount that's set by the state. But what is different is that it relies on the prior year funding as the starting point. So if the prior year amount is wrong, then the result that you get from the calculation is going to be wrong. So for whatever reason, over the years, 30 years ago, we were exactly funded the same way, $12 million School for the Deaf, $12 million for the School for the Blind. But for whatever reason, now we are funded differently. So to the degree that individually, $8,500 less per pupil at the School for the Blind versus the School for the Deaf, which is 15% lower and results in $3.6 million less funding on a per pupil basis. So it never really caught up, and we don't know exactly why that happened. But nevertheless, the impact of that is that we've had to contain our expenses, and it's been gradual, sort of like that boiling frog syndrome. You don't realize what's happening until many years later. We've not filled FTEs. We've not expanded FTEs, even though our enrollment has gone up by 40%. We have done away with some very nice health benefits for our staff and decreased those expenses. But what we've also done is we've not paid people adequately. So the primary example is our paraprofessionals. These are the lowest wage earners, I would argue the most important hardworking staff at the school. They're the ones that are changing the diapers, dealing with the bites and the scratches, and they're paid 30% less than Baltimore County public school counterparts. That's $5.34 per hour. We're a minimum wage employer, not a very enviable place to be. They can go work at Walmart and make more money than they can at the School for the Blind in dealing with complicated students. So the other piece that we discovered in the study was this pay plan, which mirrors exactly what's in place already for the School for the Deaf. It's not something special, something different. It's exactly what already exists. It allows the School for the Deaf, and hopefully for us, to present what our funding requirements are to pay our staff appropriately, and for that to be approved and then added to that formula calculation. As we look at the formula calculation in the School for the Deaf, you see these bumps over the years, And there for these.
And you're going to have to summarize.
All right, I'm already at the end. So without our services, students are vulnerable for being placed out of state. I was at Perkins. I had students who were out of state for very expensive placements. Thank you for your support for this legislation. We really appreciate it.
You're very welcome. And Marion, you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I just want to reinforce that our population has changed. 96% of our students are not just blind, but also have multiple disabilities, cognitive and physical. And this takes a lot more to deal with these students, especially from the paraeducators who often are needed to do feeding tubes also. So we don't want minimum wage payment for these types of positions handling this type of challenging job. So we thank you very much in looking at making the pay plan equitable with the School for the Deaf, which will help the school out and keep us financially viable. So thank you very much for your consideration.
Thank you. We do have a question, Delegate Grice.
Thank you, Madam Chair. School for the Blind, is it a private nonprofit? I believe.
Yes, it is.
Okay, that's good. I'm just happy to see we can all get behind a private nonprofit school. It's awesome. Thank you.
Well, the bill's going to the right subcommittee. Any other questions? Thank you very much. We're now going to move to, that concludes that bill here. We're going to move to House Bill 904, Delegate Bridges.
All right. Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. House Bill 904 is a bill to address some concerns that were highlighted because of the pandemic as it relates to new employee orientation. It's actually a bill that if you were here in 2018, you probably remember this. It came after the Janus versus ASME decision, which really granted bargaining units the right to communicate with the new employees. So based on that bill, an employer had to allow a representative to attend and participate in a new employee program to get an understanding of that bargaining unit. And it did a couple of things. One, it provided the rep at least 10 days notice of the program. The representative was permitted 20 minutes or longer to address the employee, and the employer had to encourage the employee to attend the portion, but it didn't require the employee to attend. And so with the impact of the coronavirus, though, we've noticed a couple of holes in the law. And so this bill is really to address those holes. So when a new employee has the orientation, they're often done virtually like we're doing with everything right now. What makes it hard for people to personally engage, and technical difficulties, as we all have, sometimes can lead into the presentation. Some employees some employers actually wait months before holding an orientation. And for a variety of reasons, a new employee may not be able to attend the scheduled orientation. And so what this bill does is address those in a couple of different ways. The legislation requires a meeting between the employee and the bargaining unit rep within the first pay period of the new employee. It also requires that the meeting be in person unless, like we have now, public health circumstances say otherwise. It extends the minimum time for the presentation from 20 minutes to at least 30 minutes for the bargaining representative to be with the person that they want to talk to about the union. And it ensures that notice is given to the bargaining rep of the hire. So it's 10 days notice in advance of the new employee orientation, which is the present law. But we want to start the clock when a new employee actually it starts employment. So it should be 10 days notice when the new employee is about to start. And we're asking for appropriate identification numbers, which includes workday numbers, which isn't something far from which is provided now. I know that's a point of contention for University of Maryland system. So I'll ask my panelists, Lance Kilpatrick from ASME, to elaborate on that. But we think that these are not impossible requests and willing to work with USM on their concern when it comes to providing a workday number. But we do realize the times have changed, and we think that these changes help us keep up with the times. So with that, I'll ask for a favorable report and give space for the panel to elaborate.
Okay, we have two people here to testify. And it is Lance Kilpatrick and also Guten Johnson. So Lance, do you want to go first?
Yes, Madam Chair, thank you.
Thank you.
Members of the committee, good afternoon. For the record, my name is Lance Kilpatrick, and I'm the Legislative and Political Director of AFSCME Council 3, representing 30,000 Maryland state and higher education employees. You know, Delegate Bridges did a great job of explaining the legislation, so I will not repeat so many great things that he said. But I would like to address two issues that have been raised in opposition to the legislation that the delegate kind of foreshadowed for me. One was regarding the turning over of personal identifiable information. In response, we say employers and unions throughout the nation and the state routinely share and coordinate this type of data, both in the private sector and public sector for a variety of reasons, whether it be, prescription drug, dental, or vision benefits, health insurances, supplemental insurances, savings plans, etc. The state and AFSCME have done this type of information exchange for a long time in a professional and secure manner for many years without issue. Workday IDs are actually used so that Social Security numbers are not, right? We think Workday IDs shouldn't take that long to generate, but as the delegate said, we're amenable to amending it so that, Workday IDs would be provided upon being generated or some such language like that. Regarding meeting with the employees, the bill is intended to solve a very simple problem. An employee is hired. The union wants to be able to introduce itself promptly and in person if at all possible. And we'd rather not have to wait for an orientation program because sometimes this happens months later, as my colleague, Mr. Johnson, will elaborate on. Regardless of whether a new employee wants to join the union or not, the union has a legal duty of fair representation to that employee. It only makes sense that the employee would want to know what their rights are as an employee. To accommodate pandemic conditions, the union can use Zoom or whatever to, engage with that individual. If a campus, right, within the USM system is closed for health reasons, the union will always, they must always honor that. Public health is always going to be the priority in this type of situation. And ultimately, the employee is not required to meet with us. The employee always has the option to say, sorry, I'd rather not. Thank you for your time and your patience, and we request a favorable report of this legislation.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kilpatrick. Mr. Guten Johnson.
Good afternoon, members of the committee. My name is Guten Johnson. I'm AFSCME Council Local 631 President, and I work for Maryland State Highway Administration. As a union representative, I organize my district regularly to engage with my new membership of my employees. SHA and MDOT do not hold new employee orientations right away. It can take up to months and up to a year. I have a person who spoke with me today in my shop that's been here for over a year. They haven't had orientation as of yet. I have been working constantly with MDOT and trying to have a new, we call it NEO, but new employee orientation as the membership comes in, so that they will have the right to know about their union, the rights that they have, and have an opportunity to decide if they want to be with the union or not. But they do need to know their rights and the laws that exist. This bill makes sure that the intent of the law is followed. When someone is hired, within their first few days, they will find out the union, the rights, the laws, and as a Maryland State employee, I'm working with other districts to set up meetings with new employees so that we will be able to get them within the first few days. As COVID came in and got it harder, it made us even harder to be able to reach out to the new employees. Let's fix this bill, make it right, and let everyone agree to know their rights and benefits. Thank you, and please vote yes on this legislation.
Thank you very much, Mr. Johnson. Are there any questions from members of the Appropriations Committee for the bill sponsor or the witnesses? The gentleman for Hare County is recognized, Delegate McVey.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Since I don't know exactly how unions work specifically, do these union members not have other ways to be contacted via phone, email, or the like?
Well, basically, when they come in, it takes them a period, it takes the state a period of time to send out the information, the personal information to the council. And a lot of times the information that they send to the council is not the proper information, so we can't reach out to them. After we do reach out to the new employees, we speak with them, and they'll become union membership. We will have the exact information, so if we need to reach out to them. Basically, I set up about 5 years ago in my district, District 3, where though when a new employee get hired in my district, they will stay in the district office for 3 days, go through all their core trainings, and the union has the opportunity to speak with them for half an hour. And then we will let them know their rights and what's needed to know about the union and give them the opportunity to join. So I have been working alongside with the union to stretch it out throughout all MDOT, but starting out with Maryland, SHA, and doing all 7 districts, and then using that as a modem for the rest of MDOT.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. I guess the follow-on is the individual you had referenced who has not been able to have this meeting for a year. Have they joined the union? Did they have all the information they need? And then kind of the follow-on is to the bill sponsor is, what is the core of the problem we're fixing? If, for example, that person already has joined or has the information that was given in this example.
Well, basically, by that person being in my shop and in my district, like I said, I meet them when they first come in. Within those first 3 days, the first day I meet them when they come in. But I cover 7 districts, all 7 districts. So the orientation that they have, that they give district wide, well, let's say statewide for SHA, it doesn't, that's when it takes them 6 to 8 months or 10 months to be able to go into that orientation. And by that time, anything could happen. They're not considered a new employee anymore after that long-term frame of being state employee.
Sorry, Delegate, you said you had a question for the sponsor as well.
Yes, thank you, Delegate Bridges. Just the generic, if that individual has already heard this information, what exactly are you trying to get at other than maybe getting that information to them quicker?
Yeah, I think it's all about process, especially if a person is waiting a year or 2 or however long they have to wait. Like we need to put the process in place so that, it's not, an individual has to wait 3 months, a year. They know immediately when they come in, management as well as the union representatives know that this is a process that's in place and we don't have to wait until an orientation is put together by management, which may take some time. Already in statute, it would say that, once the person comes in, they have 14 days in order to meet with the representative, and that would be across the board.
Yeah, I appreciate the response. I guess the question goes to the fact that I believe the unions are very capable in getting to new employees as long as they have that information. And we have tons of technology, websites people can read, and phone calls they can make, and emails they can send. But I appreciate your response. Thank you.
Delegate Beitzel's recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Is Mr. Johnson still there? I think Mr. Johnson. Yeah, I have a question of him. I don't see him. So in any event, my question is for this union activity and a union the union representative, I guess, am I correct in saying his name was Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Okay. All right, there you are. So when this activity is going on, you're a state highway employee, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Now, when you're doing this union organizing, which is what it really boils down to, when you're meeting with these new employees, are you still paid for by State Highway Administration? Is that part of the agreement?
Yes, basically, I'm still on the clock with them.
And also you use State Highway Administration facilities and that sort of thing?
Yes, sir.
And the employee, when they come in, is he being paid when he comes in?
Yes, because he's a new employee, so he's still employed. Yes, sir.
Yeah. Okay, so, the reasoning for my line of questioning is we have other bills where they try to limit management. They can't take time or spend money or have any resources to do any of this. And I just wanted to reinforce my line of thinking in that you're pretty much free to do whatever you want to as the president of your union. But at the same time, you're always pushing for legislation that would limit management, what their options were. So thank you for your answers.
All right, thank you.
Are there any other questions from members of the Appropriations Committee regarding House Bill 904? Seeing none, thank you very much to the bill sponsor and the witnesses for being here. That concludes the hearing for House Bill 904. We'll move on to next House Bill 803, Delegate Solomon, Facilitating University Transformations by Unifying Reductions in Emissions Future Act. Delegate Solomon, thank you very much for being here. Please proceed when you're ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for reading the full title of the bill. I know it's a mouthful. We commonly refer to it, like you said, as the Future Act. It's a little easier. Thank you, colleagues. I am very pleased to present HB 803, the Future Act. For the record, Delegate Jared Solomon. I think what is really unique about this bill, and you're going to hear from some of these folks in a couple of minutes, is this is a bill that was really driven by Mary Perg Student Climate Action Coalition, which is a group of students from across the USM, and it's really encouraging. We often focus on the downsides of young people, but these student leaders are really already taking into action what many of them are actually studying in our university systems. And so what this bill will do is really make Maryland continue to be a leader in fighting climate change. And it will position our university system and all of our public schools, including Morgan State and St. Mary's, to be carbon neutral by 2035. I think it's pretty clear that we are facing a climate emergency. And this is something that we know from international scientists and international coalitions and international reports that we have to act now. We really don't have that much time left. And Maryland is one of the states in our country that's probably most at risk of climate change. Some interesting statistics on how climate change has already impacted Maryland and how things are only going to get worse. Baltimore, between 1957 and 1963, flooded about 1.3 times a year, and Annapolis flooded about 3.8 times per year. Over the last decade, Baltimore has now flooded an average of 13 days annually, and Annapolis is about 39 days annually. Sea levels around Baltimore have increased by nearly a foot over the last century. We have, more frequent rainstorms and events, in my home county, in my home community. Several of our neighborhoods were ravaged by a flood from a storm earlier this past fall that would have normally been considered once in a century, and now is once a decade or once every 20 years. And for my friends who represent communities around the Bay, we know how much erosion and flooding and saltwater intrusion have absolutely remade those communities as well. So this is an issue that affects every single part of Maryland. And so what this bill will do is really build off of policies that many of our universities have already entered into voluntarily. So there was a joint movement back in 2006, 2007 for universities across the world to enter into carbon goals. And it's run by an organization that's now called Second Nature. And many of our schools actually signed up for this voluntarily. Not everyone, but many of them did. And so what this bill is modeled off of is really the goals that are laid out by the president's climate goals, the carbon initiatives in the Second Nature proposal. And it would look at areas in scope 1, which are emissions that are physically produced on campus. So things like the heating or power plants that some schools may have, or a university owned fleet of vehicles. Scope 2, which is purchased energy. things that are produced off campus but are impacted on and used by the schools. And then it would also include scope 3, which are more commonly referred to as induced emissions. So things like air travel for university officials or commuting for students and faculty. And again, many of our schools are already working to either dramatically reduce the carbon footprint that they have in these different areas, or are well on their way to developing systems that can do this. So what we do is we phase this in. So scope 1 and scope 2 are sort of the easiest to do, and frankly, many of our universities are already well on that path. And we phase that in by 2025, and then the scope 3, which is induced, would phase in for 2035. One of the other really important points in this bill is, there's a difference. Some of you may have heard of sort of the term net zero. Carbon neutral allows emissions to be offset by carbon offsets. And so, we're not necessarily saying that everything has to be that you have to completely change your vehicle fleet over tomorrow, or you have to change, all of your buildings to solar or to run on geothermal. We're saying that we understand that this is a transition and it's going to take time. And so you can use carbon offsets to be able to meet those goals. And a carbon offset is, you sort of pay for a project either in your community or in another part of the world that reduces carbon in the atmosphere, and you can credit that towards the energy that you use. And one of the things that we do in this bill, and again, it's in a very gradual process. We worked very closely with university officials and folks from across individual campuses. We try to encourage the use of these offsets either in our community, in our backyard in Maryland, either directly in the state or in the Chesapeake Bay watershed, or we want to make sure that we're focusing on environmental justice offsets. And that was really critical in the work that we've done, particularly for our student leaders, because we know that particularly communities of color, communities in low-income areas across the state are often hardest hit by climate change. And so we want to make sure that as the university system is investing in these types of offsets, we know that can't be done immediately. Frankly, the market for this doesn't really exist right now. It's changing, every other month. But we wanted to put the goals in place to say, not only should we be trying to, mitigate the impacts of climate change in Maryland, but we should also try to, do what we can to help the communities that frankly are hardest hit and are on the front lines of the impacts of climate change. We've worked really closely, as I mentioned, with the university system and with folks across the campus. There's a number of amendments that I'll be submitting to the committee that actually, I think make this bill better and really acknowledge some of the great work that our university systems have already done. So with the amendments that we'll be submitting, College Park is fully supportive of this bill. They've actually internally set their own goal of going carbon neutral by 2025. That was a commitment of the previous president, and one that the new president, Dr. Pines, is continuing, and I applaud him for that. We know this is a priority for Dr. Perman. You're going to hear from USM. We don't agree completely on the timeline, but we appreciate their work with us. St. Mary's College, I don't believe is signed up to testify, but they did submit written testimony with some clarifying amendments, which we are fully willing to take, and I think also make this bill better. The last point I'll leave you with before I turn it over to some of our witnesses is that we again have an opportunity here to position Maryland as a leader and really use this as a recruiting tool. We talk about putting we talk about a lot of great policy, and this really puts our money where our mouths are, and I think will allow the university system to recruit students from frankly across the world who, when you look at surveys of young people as they choose campuses to go to and where they want to spend their their precious dollars for tuition, they want universities and colleges that really practice these types of beliefs. And I think, to say we will be only the second university system behind the University of California and really the first state that will commit all of its public universities to a carbon neutral date, I think will be an incredible recruiting tool and something we really can't put a price tag on. And so I'm urging a favorable report and really grateful for the work of so many of our student leaders in helping bring this bill forward.
Thank you very much to the Vice Chairman of the Subcommittee for Education and Economic Development for submitting this bill. The committee will now take questions to the bill sponsor. The gentlelady representing Howard and Carroll counties recognized, Delegate Trent Kittleman.
Thank you. Obviously, the fiscal note bothers me a bit since they can't quantify it, but they say it's going to increase the cost to colleges hundreds of thousands of dollars. Is that one of the things you address in your amendments?
I mean, so there is going to be a cost attached to this. There's no way around that. You know, these carbon offsets do cost money, and I appreciate the question, Delegate Kittleman. I had a sneaking suspicion you might have a concern over it. You know, one of the points I want to make, and I think they reference this in the fiscal note, and this is not a knock on DLS. I think this is you know, if you ask any expert, this is a hard topic because, you know, the market for these types of offsets, and frankly, the market for renewable energy has changed so rapidly and changes literally month to month, as I said. And so it's really hard to quantify, you know, necessarily costs decades in advance. You know, what I would want to add is the university systems are already doing a lot of this work. You know, and I think there are numerous bills, you know, the Climate Solution Now Act that is moving through the Senate and has been offered, you know, by Delegate Stein, is a radical reimagining of how our state views its relationship to renewable energy and building standards. And so a lot of the things that are outlined in that bill, you know, things like actually requiring the entire fleet of state vehicles to go, you know, electric. I guess in this bill, you know, you could argue under the fiscal note that that's tagged as a cost in this bill. Well, that would be a requirement under a bill that you know, by the time we even consider this, may have already passed the Senate. You know, so I think it's hard to quantify some of that. Plus, the carbon market changes so rapidly. You know, the cost for a lot of these offsets could be dramatically less. And, you know, DLS did sort of just a back of the envelope calculation by saying, well, you know, we looked at where some of the universities are right now and, you know, seeing the amount of energy that they use, this is how much their carbon, you know, the offsets would cost. Well, the hope is that this is going to continue to go down, you know, and I think you'll hear from you know, USM and UMCs that as they do more of this work, you know, there will be fewer emissions to offset and the cost will come down. But again, you know, I think what's really critical here is this has to be a priority. You know, a lot of these universities, a lot of our schools have actually committed to doing this already. They've missed some of the timelines that they committed to already. And so this is just really saying, you know, we want to make sure that this gets done. And I think the last point that I will make, you know, that was written in the fiscal note was around sort of the, you know, the local offsets or the environmental justice offsets. You know, as I said in my testimony, we understand that the market for that may not really exist, or it's going to look very different. And so we did also put an opt-out provision. It's written in the bill one way. We're going to make a couple of changes to it, but you know, we want if a university couldn't meet the requirements laid out, and it's very small. I mean, it's like 5% of the total offsets. You know, would have to go either locally or to an environmental justice community. There is a provision that they can work essentially with a group of their students appointed by their student governments to you know, to get around that provision. We want them to be doing this in good faith. We're not going to try to penalize the university system, but if they can legitimately show, look, there is no market. We haven't, you know, built the offset capability in Maryland. There are no projects that we can invest in. There's a way for them to get around it. And one of the amendments that College Park has asked us to work on is, you know, tweaking that provision a little bit. And I think it's a reasonable ask to give the universities a way, you know, if there's a legitimate reason they can't meet it, a way around it.
And I have one comment and then a question to follow that, along with my concerns over the fund. We have students all over the country whose the debt that they end up having after going to college. It looks like we may take federal money to help them out. And it seems to me that this bill would go toward making those debts higher. The other piece, and this is one I have all the time, I'm not going to argue climate change with you. I'll accept that as a fact and something we want to do something about. But what about doing something like a risk reward analysis? You know, if you look at the things that this bill would do and try, you say you can't quantify it, but somebody can. There are people who do risk reward analysis and compare those to all the other expenses that we have for people who are, you know, having difficulty with the pandemic. To a lot of our social workers have their salaries have not been brought to the point that they should be. Every bill that's brought before us, you know, it's worth doing, but we can't do it all. And I just wondered if that was something that you had thought about doing.
Yeah, I mean, so those are interesting points. I mean, I guess to your first comment around the debt issue, there was a recent survey of college students, and I think it was 70% of them said that they want to make the decision of where to go to college based around a university's carbon footprint or their environmental record and sustainability. So I think, students are really saying this is a commitment to them, even as they're choosing where to put their important dollars, they want to go to places that are making these types of commitments. To your second point, I mean, I think, that's certainly something I would be open to. The other point that I wanted to make actually about the fiscal note, now that you mention it, is there are savings that are going to come from this, and DLS, does recognize that there are savings potential. They can't calculate it. I think there are plenty of ways that we could potentially do that. I know maybe DLS was, swamped under, under a time frame. And again, this is a complicated topic, but, things like converting making your buildings more energy efficient, while not only would, dramatically reduce your carbon footprint and the cost of potential offsets, that's going to save you, in the long run, millions of dollars. And we know, energy is typically one of the highest expenses for college. And frankly, the university system tends to be the largest user of energy of any state agency or state facility.
Thank you.
The gentleman representing Eastern Shore, Delegate.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You led off by talking about this is a major crisis. Time is of the essence. We have to act now. Certainly one of my favorite places to hang out in Annapolis is red wine. And I certainly don't want to see the Chesapeake Bay end up at some point flooding one of my favorite places to hang out in the evening. So my first question to you is, if this bill doesn't pass and we don't act now, actually, let me turn it the other way. Suppose we do pass this bill, and we implement all these things that are in the bill, and this is a big deal. I mean, as you said, we're going to be basically creating a faux market, for these energy trading, things like that. We're environmental justice scorecards. We're doing different scopes. I mean, this is a pretty substantial bill. So if this bill does pass, will it prevent the Chesapeake Bay from rising by 2055 or whatever the dates are that's in the bill?
Well, I appreciate the question, Delegate Christ, and you're right. There are numerous favorite places along Main Street that I would not want to see flooded. The first thing I will say is we're not really creating anything new here. I may have misspoken in my testimony. We're really following best practices and policies that are already laid out. We're just applying them in frankly, a little bit more of an expedited timeline for the university system, but nothing in here has been created. What we're hoping to do is incentivize more local offsets to be available. That doesn't mean that they're not already there or that the market won't create them, in further years. We're trying to essentially make it a little bit more, available, right? If there's a demand for it, then we think it'll expedite it. But this kind of work is being done all over the place. And again, nothing in here has been created new. I think this is a part of preventing that Chesapeake Bay from flooding. Everything we do, every individual choice we make, every policy we make as a state will hopefully prevent the Chesapeake Bay from flooding, our beloved places in Annapolis by 2050. But I can't guarantee that this will necessarily in and of itself fix it. But I think it is part of a policy, and frankly, will send a signal to other colleges and universities across the country, many of which there are a lot of other major universities that are doing this. My alma mater, the University of Pittsburgh, just announced that they're undertaking a similar goal. Again, College Park did this absent legislation, much quicker than frankly any other school in Maryland, because this was a priority, and they know how important it is. So I think this is another tool in the toolbox, and another solution to get us one step closer to preventing that from happening.
So I think it would be unreasonable to say that if we pass this bill, because climate change is global. That if we pass this bill and we have this mandate on our universities, is going to have any meaningful impact on climate change at all, honestly. So basically what you're saying is that the intent of this bill is to basically send a signal to the other universities in the country that they really need to kind of do what we're doing. And then hopefully if every university across the entire world, including China, India, Europe, Africa, South America, does exactly the same thing, and they follow our lead, then maybe we might have some meaningful impact, and then maybe the flooding might just might just occur at the bottom part of Main Street and not all the way up to my favorite place to hang out in the evening.
I don't know that I would characterize what I just said the way that you would. I mean, you know, the International Panel on Climate Change said that we need to be the you know, largest producers in the world. You know, countries in the world need to be net zero emissions by 2045. You know, this in and of itself will not stop climate change, but is a major piece of it. And, you know, again, the signal to the rest of the world is important, but that is not the only reason to pass this bill. This bill will not single-handedly stop climate change, but it is a part of the broader solution that, you know, again, as part of the Climate Solution Now Act that, you know, Senator Pinsky and Delegate Stein introduced. It's part of, frankly, the governor's own climate action plan, which said, you know, the state should be net zero by 2045 as well. So, you know, we are, or 2050. So, you know, this is well in line with policies that are already either in place or, you know, being considered by our body and other policymakers around the state.
The gentleman from Baltimore County is recognized, Delegate Mangione.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Delegate Solomon, for the bill. I just want to make sure that I kind of understand correctly how this works. So this is just for, I guess, university objects, so to speak, like the buildings you said, like the vehicle fleet, I guess, stuff like that, right?
As well as, you know, scope 3, which includes sort of the indirect emissions. So it's also trying to figure out, you know, so College Park already tracks the commuting distance that their faculty and staff do. So if you drive a car to campus, there's obviously carbon emissions that would be that are part of that. If you're a faculty member that teaches at the school. So College Park is already tracking that and actually already offsetting those as well.
Yeah, that's my concern here. That's what I was wondering. So they're tracking like student body, how much they're driving to the university?
So I was going to say, I wouldn't say it's specifically tracking in terms of they've put something in your car. And I wish we had somebody from College Park here from their sustainability office, but what they do is essentially average out, you know, if you live, you know, they say it takes me 10 miles to get to work, you know, and if you commute 4 or 5 days a week, they sort of average it out over the course of the year. But it doesn't, you know, there's, you know, not like one of those little insurance trackers that sends, you know, some information to the university office that says, you know, you drove 8 miles today and you drove 9.5 yesterday.
Yeah, because that's what my concern here. I read it's the scope 1 direct emissions means emissions physically produced at a public 4-year institution campus. To me, that's almost like saying, okay, if a student, member of the student body is commuting back and forth, cars give off a lot of CO2. So will the parking garages and the student parking perhaps maybe be disbanded? Or is that an idea? Because that would certainly help cut back on the CO2. I'm just wondering if this is a little too extreme in my book in terms of if you're going to be consistent, whether or not trying to really cut back on CO2. Something as simple as cutting back on car travel would fit in what you're saying. And to me, that sounds extreme, but again, inconsistent unless there's student bodies willing to do something like that. So I appreciate you bringing the bill. It just, to me, seems like it goes pretty far, but thank you though.
Thanks. Well, I certainly, you know, I think the folks from USM and UMCs can comment as well. I mean, you know, universities are thinking about creative ways to, you know, obviously reduce emissions, you know, incentivizing public transit. I don't think any university has been willing to get rid of their parking.
I didn't think so either, but I'm just trying to be consistent.
Right, but I'm just saying, you know, I think again, we're seeing the move towards electric vehicles as well. I mean, you know, anybody who watched the Super Bowl saw, you know, GM's new ad campaign that they want all of their vehicles to be electric by, you know, in the near future. You know, Volvo, many other car companies are doing the same thing. So, you know, particularly as our, you know, as society move towards more electric vehicles that run on renewable energy or can be run with renewables, you know, I think the hope is that the carbon neutral piece is a step, you know, towards, again, this eventual net zero future. You know, that frankly, again, the governor and his administration have laid out as a policy goal for the state, you know, and the carbon neutrality piece fits into that.
Thank you.
The Vice Chairwoman of the Transportation Environment Subcommittee, Delegate Krim, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'm one of those who espouses it's time for all hands on deck when it comes to climate change. So all good ways to offset emissions, all the effects of climate change. So for your bill, I'm asking about the student body. How are they involved in this? Instead of dictating to them, have them involved in developing different ways for the university to achieve their objectives. And I think young people probably have way more ideas than we do. Probably you have more ideas than I do, but definitely they have more ideas. So how, I mean, we can even give college credit for this stuff. So doing this, tell me.
Yeah, well, thank you for the question, Delegate Krim. And actually, I will say, first of all, you know way more than me on most things. And this bill was actually brought to us. I saw our student leaders smiling when you asked the question. This bill was brought to me by student leaders, and I think some of them have met with members of the committee as well. You know, and what's so gratifying about this is, again, they're putting into practice literally what they're studying. So you know, many of the student leaders with MSCAC are, you know, studying biology or sustainability. One of the student leaders is I think a master's or a PhD candidate at UMCES right now. So this bill is actually literally their practice. And so, you know, I think maybe that's an interesting point that we could write more in here about university collaboration with students. There is, you know, again, we wanted to make sure that around the offset provision that students did have a say in it. And actually a lot of campuses, you know, College Park already has, you know, the number of the things that they fund their offsets with are paid for through the student activity fee, where the students made a commitment to say, we want, you know, a percentage of our activity fee going specifically towards, you know, carbon offsets. And that's actually how they're doing their commuting offsets. So, you know, if we need to put more in here, I'd be more than happy to. And I think you'll hear probably the same thing from UMCES and USM. But yeah, the bill is a product of really our brilliant young people. I'm just kind of the guy who brought it forward.
Thank you very much, Delegate Solomon. Are there any other questions from members of the House Appropriations Committee for the bill sponsor? Segueing from the comments from the subcommittee chairwoman, Carol Krim, on transportation environment, we do have several students who are here to speak about this. And in favor testimonies, we have 8 individuals, and we also have 2 individuals who are providing favorable with amendments testimonies. And of those individuals who are providing testimonies, we have several students here today joining us, and we do want to thank the students for participating and being part of the democratic process. So as a reminder to all the witnesses, please limit your testimony to 2 minutes, please. First, we have Margaret Holland with MSCAC UMBC.
Hi, I'm Maggie Holland. I'm actually an associate professor in geography and environmental systems at UMBC. While I'm not an official spokesperson for UMBC, I am here to speak as a university educator, a researcher, and a mentor to students. In light of others providing testimony, I'll keep mine to 3 main points, all of which are further detailed in my written testimony. This bill pushes the button to accelerate and reach net zero emissions by 2035, in line with global goals to keep global warming to below 2 degrees to keep that sea level rise from rising further. This also matches the approach by the Biden administration to decarbonize the electricity sector by 2035 as well. Maryland is already a proud leader in reducing emissions, and what better places to stimulate that innovation than our universities, which can play a role of incubator of ideas, sites for new strategies, and then lead the state in meeting these new federal targets eventually. It also provides specific guidance on carbon offsets. In my own research, I am well aware that carbon offset projects are not a panacea, but can be useful tools in our climate solutions toolbox, and we need all of them. I'm especially supportive of how this bill pushes us to prioritize efforts within our own backyards. Further, there is this special carve out for environmental justice. Here, our universities can be centers of innovation around community engagement and empowerment tied to climate justice. And in the end, the reason why I'm here today is to support this next generation, including the students who have led the effort to bring this bill to the floor. At UMBC, I co-teach a course that we call Climate Change in Society, Global Change in the Maryland Context. It has everything to do with preparing students for this kind of work that I see students engaging in here, communicating on climate science, analyzing policy levers that exist to shift institutions into action, and advocating for that action to take place swiftly. This generation of students is committed to moving beyond political paralysis on climate change and getting to a position of immediate action. I'm here for that action, and I'm here for them. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Barrett. Next, we will hear from Professor Holland. We will hear from Reese Barrett next with the Mary PIRG Student Climate Action Coalition.
Good afternoon, Chairwoman McIntosh and delegates of the Appropriations Committee. My name is Reese Barrett, and I'm a very proud Marylander. I was born in Annapolis and have spent my entire life on the Severn River, crabbing and water skiing and rafting up on the 4th of July with my siblings and parents. My family is built on a foundation of sharing time outdoors, and I know a lot of you can say the same. Currently, I'm a sophomore at the University of Maryland College Park. I graduated as valedictorian from Severna Park High School in Arundel County, and I'm now majoring in chemical engineering with a minor in sustainability studies. I'm a straight-A student with a full academic scholarship, and I do research on campus because I'm hoping to someday earn a PhD and work as a professor. I've also dedicated hours and hours to climate activism because I don't feel as if I have a choice. The climate crisis threatens everything I hold dear, including my river and all of the memories I've made on the water with the people I love the most. It's true that taking action on climate is not an easy or cheap thing to do, but what is the cost of inaction? Economists say that it's about $50 per ton of CO2 emissions. Our universities are in the perfect position to be leaders on this issue for a small fraction of that price. Schools represent both their own researchers who are at the forefront of climate science and also their students who are spending tens of thousands of dollars on tuition. We are investing in our universities, and they, in return, need to invest in our futures. Universities understand the science, but there is no clear plan to implement strategies based on their values. UMD, for example, is in the process of renewing their contract for their on-campus natural gas plant. There has been no indication that the new 30-year agreement will include meaningful emissions reductions. If schools are not willing to make tangible plans and instead hide behind language of life cycle analysis, we need a state-level commitment. As adults, and especially as people in government, you have a responsibility and a moral obligation to leave the world a better place than you found it. I want you to take a hard look at the cost of inaction, and I want you to tell me that this bill costs too much. It is past time to act, but you can start today here by taking real action that leaves a legacy telling your children and grandchildren, who are people like me, that you love them enough to protect the planet they will inherit. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Barrett. Next, we will hear from Melody Arrington with the Mary PIRG Student Action Coalition. Ms. Arrington.
Good afternoon, Madam Chairwoman and distinguished delegates of the Appropriations Committee. My name is Melody Arrington, and today I will stress the importance of the Future Act and its potential to positively impact marginalized communities. Social justice has been a passion of mine since I was a child. However, when examining how to dismantle systemic inequality, too often is environmental justice left out of the discussion. I am a junior at Bowie State University, majoring in government with a concentration in political science. I serve as the Political Action and Community Outreach Chair of the Student Government Association, and I'm the Vice President of the Bowie State NAACP. Bowie State has a goal of total carbon neutrality by 2021. I'm proud of the progress my HBCU has made as a leader in environmental stewardship in Maryland. A key component of our bill is our commitment to environmental justice. Often low-income communities are most impacted by environmental racism, and Maryland is no different. As the climate crisis escalates, inevitable phenomena like global pandemics and natural disasters will devastate marginalized communities first. Air pollution and heat islands are few of many effects of climate change in our state, and that can lead to public health problems, including asthma, that have exacerbated the COVID-19 pandemic. It is too late to reverse the effects of environmental racism in the COVID-19 pandemic, but we must prevent this from happening again. We are at the turning point. Action must be taken to protect these communities before irreparable damage is done. Our universities like University of Maryland College Park and University of Baltimore are located in minority communities that will be positively impacted by this legislation. We need to protect our communities and our environment. It is imperative that this issue is taken seriously by our political representatives. I implore you all, as respected leaders in our state, make the ethical and necessary decision to dismantle systemic inequality and leave our planet better than you found it. How can you defend not fighting for the future of your families? University System of Maryland institutions create leaders. It is only right that they are leaders too. I respectfully urge you to make the morally just and paramount decision in favor of House Bill 803, the Future Act. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Arrington. Next, we'll hear from Mrs. Robin Jessica Clark with the Chesapeake Bay Foundation.
Good afternoon, Mr. Vice Chairman, members of the committee. It's a pleasure to be here today in support of HB 803. I'm not going to be as persuasive or compelling as the student testimony, I'm sure, but I did want to remind the committee and bring attention to the fact that climate change is aggravating our efforts to clean up the bay. Because of climate change, the state is going to have to do more in its bay cleanup efforts. An additional 1.1 million pounds of nitrogen will need to be removed from the bay for us to stay on target. And that's going to be in 2022, the state's going to have to write a plan to accomplish that by the 2025 deadline. So we are putting more pressure on ourselves. Warm water holds less oxygen. It leads to more dead zones. It can kill things like our iconic bass. I also wanted to draw attention to what's had some discussion so far, the carbon offset idea, and to let the committee know that CBF has been in preliminary discussions with the University of Maryland to try to find a way to make local carbon offsets more accessible through a partnership approach, whereby students from the university would come out into the field and learn how to monitor and verify carbon credits, and thereby making some of the local projects we're doing in Maryland and other environmental groups are doing, like tree plantings in urban communities, tree plantings on farms, accessible to the carbon offset market. The big hurdle to creating these carbon offset markets is that verification, which can be costly in and of itself. So through partnership, I think that provision of this legislation could become really facile, really helpful, and contribute to the education of our students, the cleanup of the bay, and addressing some of these inequalities, because some of the things we can do could be targeted toward underserved areas vulnerable to climate change. So for these reasons, I do urge a favorable report. Thank you for the time.
Thank you very much, Ms. Clark. Next, we will hear from Ms. Nina Jeffries with the Mary PIRG Student Climate Action Coalition.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members of the Appropriations Committee. Thank you for taking the time to hear our testimony. I'm Nina, a native Marylander and junior at the University of Maryland College Park. I'm here today because I have a responsibility to mitigate the effects of our changing climate and protect our state however I can. I'm here today to use the power that I have as a voter, an activist, and a student. My peers today are focusing on the carbon neutrality aspects of our bill, and I will focus on how our bill also promotes high-quality environmental education. We hope that the bill will foster a robust group of sustainability staff at each school. We believe that if the staff meet regularly, that the offices can learn from each other. We believe this will produce stronger initiatives to support students and foster new cross-university relationships and programs. We believe that information sharing will help equalize the abilities of all sustainability staff despite differences in funding or staffing. Sustainability staff support important programs that advance climate action. An example of a body that the University of Maryland's Office of Sustainability supports is the University Sustainability Council, which advises the Office of the President on the Climate Action Plan. At the request of students, the council investigated and endorsed a plan in 2020 that would allow UMD to be carbon neutral by 2025. This endorsement not only demonstrates how vital sustainability staff is to advancing climate action and lifting student concerns, but it demonstrates that the 2035 neutrality deadline in the Future Act is reasonable, achievable, and forgiving. A 2050 deadline is passive and unacceptable. Education is a fundamental part of addressing any social, environmental, or economic issue. By supporting environmental education with sustainability staff, we can create greater understanding of climate science, energy consumption, and environmental injustices, so that our public universities can continue to produce well-rounded and well-informed students. Carbon neutrality is possible for one of our largest universities as soon as 2025. Our 2035 deadline is not unreasonable. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Ms. Jeffries. Next, we will hear from Ms. Christine Naus with the Mary PIRG Students, University of Maryland Center for Environmental Science.
Thank you, Mr. Chair Chang and delegates of the Appropriations Committee. My name is Christine Knaus, and I'm a PhD candidate at the University of Maryland Center for Environmental Science. I'm here today as a scientist, a student, a UMD alum, and as a Marylander. My experiences as a child on the Chesapeake Bay are what led me to be an environmental scientist. Maryland is highly vulnerable to climate change, and therefore should be taking significant leadership on this issue. Sea level is rising faster in the region compared to the global average because the land is also sinking. Excess nutrients from more intense storm events and warmer water temperatures promote harmful algal blooms and increase dead zones, which negatively affect many of the local commercial fisheries. To limit these impacts, we need more aggressive timelines in our carbon neutrality plans. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change says that to prevent major impacts and limit temperature increases to 2 degrees, we need to cut global annual emissions in half by 2030. The ability for universities to purchase carbon offsets in the framework of the Future Act will facilitate substantial emissions reductions by 2035, secure co-benefits for the state, and still allow the universities to operate their plants until their end of life. As a 2-time national champion with the Terps field hockey team, I know what it takes to accomplish seemingly insurmountable challenges. And the way we do that is together, as a team. Our flagship university's identity is to be fearless. So I urge you to embrace that and to do your part in combating climate change with us, and for Maryland by supporting HB 803. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Next, we will hear testimony from Emily Friess with the Chesapeake Climate Action Network Action Fund.
Hello, my name is Emily Friess. I'm the Maryland Grassroots Coordinator at Chesapeake Climate Action Network Action Fund, 64. And I'm just here to give our resounding support of this bill. As has been mentioned by others on this call, we are working hard on getting the entire state to net zero emissions by 2045, in line with those IPCC deadlines that many on this call have already highlighted. So we have a strong need to have all sectors of our economy working hard to get to those deadlines. We know that some sectors of our economy are going to take longer to get to that net zero point than others. So it is essential that the universities that can do this, take this action, do this action, since it is very feasible for them, especially with the ramp up that is outlined in the bill. And I just want to add additional points just about the state context on these goals. Delegate Solomon mentioned that Hogan's own Maryland Department of Environment has also identified that net zero target is very necessary. So this is just not controversial. We know we need to get there, and we have a lot of ability to do that in our university system. So I don't want to make a lot of points that others have already made. And again, the students' testimony is much more compelling. So we really urge the support of this bill. It is very aptly named. And I do want to also mention that as a statewide organizer, I work with students across the state, and many of them, especially in the Sunrise movement, are looking at where they are going to go to college right now. And overwhelmingly across parties, we see that young people support climate action. So when they are making those decisions, they really are looking at what university systems have committed to carbon neutrality. So again, just really want to echo those points and say that this is right in line with both the federal and state level conversations around this topic.
Thank you very much, Ms. Friess. And the last favorable testimony is Samaya Duffin with the Mary PIRG Student Climate Action Coalition.
Hello, everybody. How are you doing? Hello, Chairman McIntosh and the rest of the Appropriations Committee. Thanks for taking the time to speak with me today. My name is Samaya Duffin from Montgomery County, Maryland, and I'm here in support of the Future Act as a fellow Marylander who looks forward to serving her nation in more ways than one. I'm a third-year psychology research major at Morgan State University in Baltimore. I serve as the president of the only active environmental organization on campus, an ROTC cadet on campus, and the Environmental Justice and Education Committee leader in NSCAC. Carbon neutrality doesn't consider that sources of emissions which can have public health impacts are located in marginalized communities. The exposure to have a climate change defense plan is a privilege. Communities of color have been disproportionately affected by climate change and don't have the resources to defend themselves against its effects. Baltimore is a city full of influential public university. The Future Act makes it mandatory that students are a part of these types of conversations, that we are discussing how our school impacts the community through an environmental scope. This bill ensures that students gain the knowledge and skills that we need to understand how our university could productively compensate for carbon usage using carbon offset projects that specifically assist communities within a criteria. Our bill also includes provisions to address this issue and help to lessen the disparity in the form of local and environmental justice requirements for offsets. Local offsets project could be in the form of a community garden in a food desert or a tree planting program. Campuses have two options for obtaining offsets. They can purchase them from a vendor or create their own, verified through a peer review process. There's a false taboo myth that climate change can only be fought on the grass tops when there's real strength in the grassroots, and the Future Act is a great way to reveal that. Over the past year, we, the students, have had to adapt in new ways to learn throughout the pandemic. We have proven to be resilient in time of adversity over and over again. As politicians and members of previous generations, it's your duty to pass down the tools that benefit us while leaving a legacy behind for us to learn from. The time is to start taking action, as we all have said, is now, and we will pay the price later. Thank you again for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Ms. Duffy. To all the individuals who provided favorable testimony, especially thank you to all the students for letting your voice be heard today. Are there any questions from members of the Appropriations Committee for this set of witnesses? Seeing none, we'll move on to favorable with amendment witnesses. We have Mark Beck with the University System of Maryland. Mark Beck.
Yeah, yes. Good afternoon, Chair McIntosh, Vice Chair Chang, and members of the committee. I'm Mark Beck. I'm the Director of Capital Planning for the USM. I appreciate this opportunity to talk to you today. First off, let me acknowledge the advocacy of all these students you've heard from and others, many others, who continue to lead this charge. I've submitted written testimony today, but I'd like to take a minute just to focus on a couple of key points. First, let me say that we do support the intent of this bill. As a system, we're dedicated to reducing energy use and greenhouse gas emissions and of achieving carbon neutrality. In fact, we would like the opportunity to work with the committee and the bill sponsor to address some of the aspects of the bill that might help us improve our ability to achieve those goals. Let me give you a quick rundown of what we've done to date. So far, as a system, we have about 80 green, LEED or silver, LEED silver or better buildings that have been opened or are in development. We have, I should mention, half of those are projects that were funded through auxiliaries or non-state funding. We've collectively across the system documented and publicly reported 34% reduction in CO2 emissions. It's a reduction of about 300,000 metric tons a year since 2007. Someone told me that's the equivalent of removing about 64,000 cars from the road. In the last decade, our institutions have made significant reductions in energy use, changing campus behavior, utilizing energy performance contracting, and using an enhanced reliance on renewable energy sources. In fact, the average energy reduction exceeds 15%, and the average use of renewables right now is 37%. College Park, that you've heard a lot about, is, I think, 95% renewable now from purchased electricity. From a budget standpoint, I think it's important to say that every institution has a slightly different capability to achieve carbon neutrality. Most have adopted a goal originally of carbon neutrality by 2050, given moderate enhancement of current resources. A few are now targeting dates much sooner than that, and I think we could bring more institutions along more quickly. But it's important that we assess the impact of accelerating the target, because it would require a shift in resources, resulting in impacts on state operating support and changes in campus funding priorities. Given the integrated nature of the state's operating and capital funding programs, where changes in one agency can impact available support for all others, one of the things that we might do is consider a statewide rollout of carbon reduction goals, extending beyond higher education to all state government. The bottom line, I think, is that the goal of carbon neutrality is critically important, and the technology to achieve it is improving every year. I think we'd just like to take the time from our end to do it right.
Thank you very much, Mr. Beck. And next, we also have favorable with amendment testimony from David Namazi with the University of Maryland Center for Environmental Science.
Thank you, Chair McIntosh and Vice Chair Chang and members of the Appropriations Committee to provide this testimony on behalf of UMCs. My name is Dave Namazi. President Goodwin would have liked to have been here himself, but he was in a series of climate change meetings. We certainly support the goals of this bill toward carbon neutrality and applaud the students and the sponsor for challenging us to react faster. Maryland has made progress toward meeting its greenhouse gas emission goals, but much more aggressive actions will be needed to significantly reduce the impact of a hotter Maryland with warming and rising seas and more impactful storms. We've all taken multiple steps toward energy efficiency. At the UMC's campus, we now have a 10-acre solar field, plus an additional parking lot canopy for 46 spots. That alone, helps meet 50% of our energy needs in Cambridge, which is tremendous. Our concerns, and you've heard these, are largely related to the costs of becoming carbon neutral without additional state investment. And I think, as Mark Beck had said, different campuses of different sizes have different ways to meet those needs. And the concern is that if the state capital program isn't brought into this bill, it may require us more time to really meet these important goals. Where many institutions, including UMCs, are willing to serve as pilot programs to see what we could learn from some of these actions and planning and implementation so they could be applied statewide. So UMCs looks forward to continuing to work with the students, the sponsor, and the committee, and offers its support with amendments to HB 803. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions from members of the House Appropriations Committee for these two witnesses? Seeing none, thank you very much. That ends the bill hearing for House Bill 803. Next, the committee will hear the last bill of today's virtual bill hearing. It is House Bill 913, Delegate Bandari, Board of Community College Trustees for Baltimore County, Collective Bargaining Faculty. Delegate Bandari, welcome to your House Appropriations Committee. Please proceed when you're ready.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chairman, Vice Chair Chang, and esteemed of the House Appropriation Committee. For the record, I'm Delegate Bandari on behalf of HB 913, a Board of Community College Trustees for Baltimore County Collective Bargaining Faculty. Since this is the last bill, we'll be very, very quick. What does this bill do? If enacted, this legislation would allow for all faculty members at the Community College of Baltimore County, CCBC, to enter into collective bargaining. As it stands, only certain employees have the right to enter into collective bargaining at CCBC. This bill would simply expand the scope of provisions to allow faculty to enter into it as well. Collective bargaining gives educator a voice. Collectively, they can secure vital resources to help their colleges bring in more public resources to improve education. The strength in unions is critical to improving our economy and helping working families get ahead. Over the interim, I worked with Dennis Riley and Todd Reynolds from American Federation of Teachers, Maryland, to come up with the framework for this legislation. And I would like to thank Dennis and AFT for their support. I also spoke with Dr. Sandra Curtinitis, president of CCBC, and she stated that she's not opposed to this legislation. The fight for faculty to enter into collective bargaining at CCBC has been going on for quite some time now. Some of the adjunct professors we spoke to mentioned that they have been fighting this battle for a decade at this point. As an educator, myself and a union member, I know the importance of being able to enter into collective bargaining. And I believe we owe it to both the faculty and the CCBC institution to pass this legislation. I would like to thank all of those who have submitted their written testimony and those presenting oral testimony today, including Todd Reynolds, Chuck Cook, who is the political and legislative director for the AFL-CIO in Maryland and DC, and Dr. Kim Jensen, a professor and faculty member at CCBC. Thank you for your time, and I request a favorable report from the Appropriation Committee on House Bill 913.
Thank you very much, Delegate Bhandari, for presenting House Bill 913. We will have testimony from 3 witnesses that are in favor and 1 favorable with amendments, and then we'll take questions from members of the Appropriations Committee. The first one we have is Kim Jensen. Kim Jensen.
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, Kim Jensen, if you could please provide testimony within a 2-minute time.
Okay, well, I will try to confine myself to 2 minutes. My name is Kim Jensen. I'm a full professor at the Community College of Baltimore County. I've been working with Dr. Curtinitis and the rest of the staff and faculty and my colleagues since 2003. Well, actually, I got there before Dr. K. So I teach English and creative writing, and I want to thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to speak. And I really want to thank you for considering this bill again. As you had mentioned, faculty have been fighting for this for over a decade. This has been going on for a long time. I really do hope that this bill passes finally. It's really about time. So I think that I've already submitted some written testimony, so I'm not going to completely repeat myself, but I do want to pick out a few points from my written testimony. And some of my written testimony that I submitted for this committee was partly from an op-ed that I wrote for the Baltimore Sun back in one of the last iterations of this struggle to get collective bargaining for faculty. And so if anyone's interested, you can also Google that. That was Baltimore Sun 2014. What I really want to say is how important this is. I'm a full-time faculty, and so I have benefits and I have a good salary. We have a salary scale, and I love my job. And I really don't have that many complaints about my own working conditions. But I've been particularly blessed to have this position. And what we really see going on, not only in Maryland, but in the countrywide, is the increased adjunctification of higher education. And it's my understanding now that more than around 80% of classes in the state of Maryland are taught by part-time faculty with very few benefits. These are at-will employees, many who are working below the poverty line. And we really need this bill. And not only do we need it, it's, as I said in my testimony, in layman's terms, it's kind of a no-brainer. The right to collective bargaining and to organizing unions is enshrined in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights that was signed in 1948. And we still don't have that for this whole huge swath of public employees in Maryland. So it's not a good look. And also it's not good for our students. Our students come first. I absolutely love my job. I love what I do, and I love our students, but they are best served by faculty who have a voice in the decision making. They're best served by faculty who have access to professional development opportunities, who have access to stable employment. It certainly doesn't do any of our students any favors to have their classes being taught by people who are so vulnerable in their working conditions. So those are a few things I want to say. I think I only have probably 30 seconds left, but I want to kind of tell you, I want to leave you on a personal note. I'm at my home right now, and I'm actually, I don't know if you can see over there, but sitting on my couch is my elderly father. And I'm on FML right now. I'm actually taking some sick leave that I have accrued to take care of my father with Parkinson's. And the reason that I'm able to do this is because of the fact that I enjoy such good benefits right now, that my dad was really suffering in his retirement community due to COVID-19 and total isolation. I'm really lucky to be able to say that I can have my dad in my home and care for him for a little while because I have leave. Unfortunately, I'm in the minority of faculty in higher ed in Maryland that actually have that opportunity to do a basic thing like take care of a family member. And I'm going to leave it there, except to say I just support this. I hope you do as well. I'm going to hang around and take any questions if people would like further testimony. And please check out the letter that I already submitted. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Jensen, and thank you for letting the committee take a peek at what's going on in your house, and let Dad know we said hello from the House Appropriations Committee.
Thank you.
Next, we have favorable testimony from Chuck Cook with the Maryland State and DC AFL-CIO.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, members of the committee. Kim actually brought up the United Nations Universal Declaration of Human Rights. You'll see in our written testimony, I actually have a link to that as one of our footnotes. And she's right, since 1948. It's an enabling right, a fundamental right that ensures the ability to protect other rights. But I'd like to go one step further and point out that in our written testimony, I also talk about President Joe Biden's executive order on January 26, where he says, and I quote, "It is also the policy of the United States to encourage union organizing and collective bargaining." And I'm going to repeat that one more time. It is also the policy of the United States to encourage union organizing and collective bargaining. I think that's an incredibly powerful statement from the President of the United States government. So one thing I'd like to say is there's a lot of confusion sometimes on these collective bargaining bills. I know that you guys in appropriations get a ton of them every year. In no way, shape, or form does it mandate a union. It doesn't force anyone to join a union. It doesn't force the creation of a union. All it does is says that the faculty at CCBC now get to enjoy the right, if they so desire, to form a union, which some of you may not be aware of this. It involves month-long elections to determine whether they want representation, followed by months-long elections on what that representation actually looks like. But either way, they have the ability to do it. All that we are doing with this bill is enabling them, giving them the freedom that both the United Nations and the United States government has said that they deserve, which currently they do not enjoy that freedom. So we're asking, very simply put, if you can just pass the bill, and we'd love to see a unanimous vote because all of us believe in freedom here, to give them the freedom to organize if they make the choice to do so. And that's really the most important thing here. Give them the choice. So with that, on behalf of Maryland and DC's unions, we absolutely urge a favorable vote on this collective bargaining bill for CCBC faculty. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Cook. Are there any questions from members of the Appropriations Committee for the favorable panel? The Delegate Kettleman, you're recognized.
Thank you. Yeah, I want to thank you all, particularly Kim Jensen. I was going to ask, I have always looked at an adjunct professor in a different way than I was sitting here looking up the definition. Adjunct professors in my world have been people who just teach one or two courses and that it's not a full-time job, but apparently I'm wrong. And I just wondered if you might enlighten me a little bit more about the adjunct professors and how they're used.
Okay, so I unfortunately don't have the statistics for you.
No, that's okay, just generic.
But I can tell you that a lot of people operate under the assumption that you just explained, which is, oh, adjuncts, they're full-time jobs elsewhere, and then they come in and maybe teach a night class. And that's really not the case, especially in my area. Most of the people that I know, most of the adjunct workers or part-time teachers that I know are piecing a living together by picking up as many classes as they possibly can. Most of the faculty, especially in my area, in the humanities and the social sciences, and I do believe it's the same way in nursing and other areas, like I said, I don't have the numbers, are really not having full-time employment elsewhere, but and maybe there's someone else who's favorable here who has the statistics on that. But no, most adjuncts that I've ever known in my life are truly suffering, and they're applying for jobs, full-time jobs, which are at a premium over and over again and getting rejected. And Delegate Kilman, the thing that is most upsetting about it is that I've gone through people that I've worked with, colleagues, esteemed colleagues, who can't pay their medical bills, who can't take care of their parents, who can't do anything really, and they're earning less than $20,000 a year. In some cases, they're poorer than the students that they're teaching.
Thank you for the answer.
Thank you, Delegate Kittleman. Are there any other questions from members of the Appropriations Committee for the favorable?
Mr. Chair, I think Todd is there to testify.
Yes,
Okay.
yes, to the bill sponsor. Yes, sir. We are going to get to him next. Favorable with amendment testimony is Todd Reynolds, AFT Maryland.
Good afternoon, Vice Chair Chang and members of the House Appropriations Committee. My name is Todd Reynolds, and I am the political coordinator for the American Federation of Teachers Maryland, a state federation for a number of local labor unions representing large groups of state employees, Baltimore City and county employees, public school workers, and higher education staff at both Salisbury University and the University of Maryland Center for Environmental Science. Nationwide, AFT represents over 200,000 higher education workers, both staff and full and part-time faculty at universities and community colleges alike. AFT Maryland calls for a favorable report for HB 913, the bill that would grant the right of faculty at the Community College of Baltimore County to choose whether or not to engage in collective bargaining with the college administration. We are offering as a friendly amendment language to clarify that the board must create bargaining units for both full-time and part-time faculty. Briefly, the college already bargains with its classified staff and has had that in place since, I believe, the mid-1990s. This bill is enabling language that gives faculty the right to choose whether or not they want to engage with management to bargain an agreement covering the conditions of employment. The amendment brings the bill in line with what is already in place at numerous community colleges nationwide, and indeed is true at our own Montgomery College right now, by clarifying that bargaining units shall be created for both full-time and part-time faculty. Again, AFT Maryland calls for a favorable report for HB 913. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Reynolds. Are there any questions from members of the House Appropriations Committee for Mr. Reynolds? Seeing none, thank you very much, Mr. Reynolds. That concludes the bill hearing, House Bill 913. Delegate Bandari, thank you very much for being here.
Thank you.
That concludes the bill hearing for today. We'll have announcements from the Appropriations Committee. First announcement is that the Education Economic Development Subcommittee will be voting after the bill hearing. There was a Zoom link that was sent last night regarding that that voting session. The full committee.
Mr. Chairman, we can give people 5 minutes to stretch the legs for the subcommittee since we're just finishing this.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Also, the full committee will be voting tomorrow, Friday at 12 p.m. A vote list is available on the Maryland General Assembly website, and also a voting packet will be emailed out to all of our offices for us to review on any amendments prior to tomorrow's voting session. The chairman of the Transportation Environment Subcommittee is recognized.
Mr. Chairman, our subcommittee will meet at 3:45, so only 3-minute break. I'm not as generous as Chair Barnes, and you should all have the Zoom link in your calendars. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Are there any other announcements from members of the House Appropriations Committee or the Appropriations Committee staff? Seeing none, on behalf of House Appropriations Committee Chairwoman Maggie McIntosh, thank you everyone for being here today and have a great evening.